his complaint and her complaint, when I've heard his pain and her pain, when they've said what they would like to see differently, when they've said how they would like it to be, where they've talked about the fact they feel hopelessness, and when eventually we get round to talking about, well, you're really set on that, and you are really set on that, the thing that will determine whether that marriage has a future, whether they're going to enjoy it or not, will be very simple. Will I allow my heart that is set on something to become slightly less set? Will I soften my heart? He doesn't make me feel secure enough. She doesn't give me enough attention. I want it to be like this. I want it to be like that. And the marriages that find a happier day are the ones that let go of what their hard hearts are set on. Every time without fail, I sit down with two people who I think, I really like both of you. I like having you as friends. But they can't get on with the toffee because they've become hardened in this or hardened in that. So we're going to have a little look at marriage today, because last week we looked at how we're very set on having an identity and being able to define it ourselves. And we'll define it by almost anything. And we looked at how people want to even define it by their undefinition of gender. So today we're going to look at marriage and how we can have a soft heart towards it. So we look down at verse 5. It was because your hearts were hard that Moses wrote to you this law. And Jesus replied, but at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, get the language. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Now remember, Jesus is saying in this whole section, it's a whole section about those who come after me and follow me will be like me. And he is the God who suffers. He is the Lord who is prepared to face hard things in order for other people to have a future. In this whole context, he is quoting this verse and saying, your relational orientation should be one of, not how do I get what I want to make myself feel better and have me at the centre, but how do I give myself away for the good of others and enjoy the faithfulness and goodness of God. And right in the middle of that, he has this description of marriage, of relationship, man and woman. And it can be done, it's just beautiful here, okay. It is, well, I'll come to this in a minute, okay. Marriage and relationships are God's idea. In the Bible, there are basically three categories of relationship. Very simple. There is family, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, family. There are neighbours, people who you are not biologically related to at all. And then there is this really close one of marriage. So you've got family, neighbours, and marriage. Now, marriage is a uniquely close one for reasons that we'll see in a minute. But the first thing I need to say is, it's God's idea, not ours, so it doesn't belong to me. But the problem is I want to use all my relationships for me, don't I? Marriage is his institution for his purpose, and we enjoy it when we do it his way. But I don't go into my relationships thinking, I wonder how the Lord wants me to use my relationships. But if it belongs to him, it's got to be for his purpose. But I'm hard-hearted, and I want to use relationships for my end. And I will talk a little bit about that in a minute, about how that worked out for when me and Jane started courting and dating, started going out together. One of the last questions I was asking, really, if I'm honest, was, what does the Lord want to do with this? Most of the time you hear about, well, how do I want to use this thing? But if it belongs to him, if he defines it, I'll get it right. If it belongs to him, it doesn't belong to me, and also I don't get the privilege of redefining it and saying this is what I want it to look like. And in a little while, we're going to talk a little bit about the recent redefinitions of marriage in our culture. So this is a beautiful plan of God for relationships. It is so intimate, so together, so companioned, so connected, so unified. What is the phrase there in the Bible that's used to describe it? It's a beautiful phrase. Man will leave his father and mother, so there's a disconnection, come together, and they will become what? Now, if you slow down to think about how beautiful and how full and how rich that phrase is. Become one flesh. So connected. You know, I don't know if you've noticed this, but my arm and my torso, they are one flesh. Totally connected. So what does this carry the idea of? It carries the idea of total exclusivity. Total wedded together, and it's complementary here, a man and a woman, and just one man and just one woman. There's got to be a man, got to be a woman, and it's exclusive in that they come apart from. There's a disconnection of sorts, a leaving of one set of relationships to make this one the exclusive centre, most important connection. Just the two of you. It is exclusive. What's more than that is it is enduring. The Bible teaches us that it is for life. Now I need that. And the reason that I need that level of security is because I'm a mess. Can you imagine how insecure I would feel if every time I don't deliver my part of the bargain, which is pretty much a daily deal, then I'm under threat of the relationship coming apart? No, it's an enduring one. I'm hard-hearted, she's hard-hearted, two hard-hearted selfish sinners in close proximity. Anything could happen. And therefore God says, before you go into it, you are determined that come what may, no matter how you feel, no matter what you want from it, you are bound together in this enduring relationship, for better, for worse, in richer, in poorer, in sickness or in health. You stick it. And I'm really glad that although Jane and I didn't agree on very much when we first got married, that was one thing we did agree on, and if we hadn't agreed on and hadn't trusted that that was from the Lord, we wouldn't still be together. And there's plenty of stories that back that up. So the essence of this one flesh union is that it is enduring. It's not based on feelings or present experience, because if it was, we'd be doomed. It's bound on a covenant, because God has put two people together, and they will stick it. You see, sometimes people can fall in and out of love, or the loving feeling. Sometimes we'll come along and say, well, I'm not happy. I deserve a little bit of happiness. I'm just not feeling it anymore. I want my life to go in a different direction. But the essence of marriage isn't the feeling, but it's a covenantal intention. That God says, you will stick together and I will do good things through that. I promise to love you, not just in the present, but in the future when I don't want to anymore. I'm going to love you. So it is enduring. It's exclusive, it's enduring, it's complementary. Okay, that's really, really important now. Complementary means it's a male and a female together, and God intended it that way. In fact, it is impossible to have marriage without it being a male and a female straight away. Think about it. You can do every biological function, every single one, on your own, except one. What is it? Reproduce. You can do everything else yourself. And you can only reproduce one flesh when you come together. In fact, one flesh gets fleshed out that way, doesn't it? It is so unified, it is so together that it produces the fusing of your DNA in the process of making another. That's what a child's for. A child's supposed to have a mum and a dad. We get that, don't we? But a child has to have a mum and a dad to even exist. A coming together. One flesh is biological. It's more than that, but it's certainly not less than that. How do you limit marriage to two if it isn't biological like that? Biology dictates that it is. So we know as well, don't we, that recently there has been a redefinition of marriage. It's interesting, isn't it, that in a culture, whoever owns the words has the power. Because if you get to choose the words and control the use of words, then you get to control the outcome. So whereas when there was legislation that was asking the question about whether people who were already in a gay civil partnership could be married, the question became, is this about gay marriage? Now, there's some people saying we're very pro that. The people who were saying, no, we want traditional marriage, and they talked about it being a redefinition of marriage. But the media got a hold of it and used the phrase gay marriage. So the moment you start talking about gay marriage, it stops being a question of how are we redefining marriage? And it became a question of equality. And therefore, it went this way very quickly. But the Bible knows nothing of any kind of lifelong committed relationship that is not between a man and a woman together. Simple as that. So whatever this so-called gay marriage is, it isn't marriage. Now we live in a society, and I'm very glad that we're free to do whatever we want, and that's why civil partnership, though I wouldn't ever encourage anybody to go into it, it is permissible in our secular, pluralistic country. But this thing called gay marriage, it doesn't exist. Now I know that immediately presents loads of questions for you guys. What happens if I've got good friends I'm trying to reach out to and that they're in a same-sex relationship, and or what do I do when they come and say, oh look, we're getting married, do I celebrate with them, do I attend? Those are all questions that I would love to talk to you about, and we haven't got time here. But the two things that I would simply say is, number one, we show love and compassion for anybody, no matter what their circumstance and what their situation is, because that's what Jesus did to us. But what we also do is we also know in the back of our heart that God intended things to work a special way, and when we're trying to pursue it and make it ours through our hard-heartedness and bend His things to use for our purposes in our way, people get hurt, things get broken, and God gets dishonoured. And it's really hard to hold those two things together, isn't it? Really difficult. And I know many of us are sitting in this room thinking, I wish we didn't even get put in this situation where we have to even talk about this, but that's the world we live in. So what we want to make sure is that people who are trying to figure out their sexuality and figure out their relationships, whatever form it comes in, they have a place here to work it through. We want people to be here, hearing the love of Jesus as the frame and the place where they can work it through. And there's loads more we can say, but we can't do it now. So we see that this one flesh relationship, it's exclusive, it's enduring, it's complementary, and it is the whole person. It is the whole person. And I don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable, but I need to talk about sex for a little bit. So what is happening? The high point of marriage is in saying that every part of me is going to be connected and going on that journey with you. So I lay aside my individualism. I lay aside my personal plans. I get connected to you legally. I get connected to you financially. I get connected to you emotionally. And the illustration of that is a shields down, utterly naked, coming together, warts and all, seeing me as I really am and connecting to me as I really am at a personal and deep level. That is why there is no such thing as safe sex. Sex is always dangerous because it is so deep and emotionally powerful in our lives. It's massive. It's like a glue that was designed by the Lord to stick us together. It is both the consummation of and the ongoing renewal of marriage relationships, one flesh. We connect at every level. And so we have terrible sexual confusion at the moment, with people not quite knowing whether they're coming or going, and they're trying to use use sex and sexuality in a way that wasn't intended, and them getting terribly, terribly hurt. But against the backdrop of that, I found some really interesting research recently that shouldn't surprise us when we think about it. Who are those who report best sex? You'd have thought it'd be the young people who are living it large and letting it loose and just trying everything out, wouldn't you? Well, according to this, I can give you the quotes for it later, that the studies are consistently showing that the people who are happiest sexually are you ready? Married, middle-aged, traditional valued Christians. Okay, so no, I can show you the research. I'll show you the research. Let me just say that again. The people who are happiest sexually are married, middle-aged, conservative, traditional values Christians. Why? Because what they've done is they've realised that this sexual thing is about an expression of a deep unity that fits into every part of your life. Now, of course, part of the reasons that you shake your head is that because you've been tempted to buy in to to the idea that sex is something that simply happens to my body. But we also know that it's not true, that. So long, for so much of the time, the hookup culture has desperately been trying to teach us that sex is merely some sort of outward physical thing that you do, almost like a physical thirst, like drinking a glass of water, that what I do with my body doesn't touch the inner person or my soul. And yet we know that that is totally not true. We know that there is a connection between our bodies and our souls, so that when that component of us is connected, it is joyful, and when it is hurt, it is the most difficult of hurts to bear. Because one flesh is really powerful, and it involves the whole of our person. So a little quote for you from one pastor over in the States who says this: "Sex is God's appointed way for two people to say reciprocally to one another, I belong completely and exclusively to you. When we have sex outside of marriage, we are essentially lying with our bodies. Our actions are saying that we are united on all levels, when in reality we are not. We're contradicting ourselves. We're putting on an act. We're being dishonest." And as you know, physical gestures mean something. If I've been a real enemy to you, and I come over and I sort of put my hand on your shoulder and go, there, you feel the mismatch, don't you? Because the physical gesture doesn't match the attitude that you've got towards me. And in the same way, gestures mean something. So sex, as the most intimate form of physical union, is meant to express the ultimate form of personal union in our marriage. So we don't give ourselves away sexually too quickly. In fact, we wait until all the protections are around. And one of the problems at the moment with the dating culture is I want all the benefits of marriage, i.e. a sense of connection, a sense of unity, a sense of identity, a sense of companion, and I want it with none of the protections. So I will give myself away physically because it will help me feel good for a little while, or it will give me that sense of connection, it will give me a sense that somebody loves me. And then none of the protections of legally being bound, of the community agreeing you are an item, of somebody standing up and saying, I will no matter what. And so when that breaks down, utter heartache and pain. And many of you are still trying to recover from that pain that you've experienced. We're so confused about this. Our hearts are hard-hearted and hurting, and we've dishonoured God, and we've been confused. And there's nowhere more so than in the hookup culture where this happens. If you haven't been talking with young people lately, you may not realise how soulless the hookup culture is. A hookup can be any level of physical involvement, from kissing to sexual intercourse, and according to the rules of the game, by the way, this is what you're encouraged to do by virtually every Hollywood movie that you'll watch. According to the rules of the game, you're not to become emotionally attached. No relationship, no commitment, no exclusivity. The script is that you're supposed to be able to walk away from that experience. Researcher Donna Freitas says this after interviewing hundreds of students, concluded that the hookup culture, quote, creates a drastic divide between physical intimacy and emotional intimacy. It teaches young people not to reckon with someone else's personhood. So she interviewed a whole stack of young people, and a college student named Alicia says this: hookups are very scripted. You learn to turn everything off except your body and make yourself emotionally vulnerable. Another student, Fallon, laments, sex should stem from emotional intimacy, and it's the opposite with us right now. Another student named Stephanie said this: it's body first, personality second. And we've been encouraged to do that. And there's something about us wanting to give ourselves away that we run into this, and then there's the emotional and psychological hurt that comes later. What we've done is we've put this thing in between being family, neighbour, and married. So in between neighbour and married is hookup culture, and next is dating. Those aren't supposed to be there. You're supposed to either be a neighbour or married, if you're not family. But we've put these things in the middle, and it's hurting us as a result. So the dating process starts totally wrong, doesn't it? It starts with me thinking about how I can feel more fulfilled or get what I want or get my shopping list of somebody to help them to bring them into the process of making me feel better about myself or to give me a sense of connection. So if I start, by the way, thinking about relationships like that, by the time I've got to marriage, that's going to affect my marriage as well, isn't it? So I thought I'd talk a little bit about how wonky and messed up I was in this. Because what was happening is I like to think through an individualistic lens, perhaps you do as well. And if I take that into marriage, what I will do is I will have a shopping list for the person that I wanted to marry. Now Jane and I met when we were as students, and I basically looked for the things that were on my list. And what was on my list? Well, I knew she was supposed to be a Christian, so we were sort of running in the right direction. And then what I did was I had another list, and it was pretty simple, and she ticked the boxes. I wanted somebody who was fit and sporty, so I was very attracted to her, and I wanted somebody who was focused. You know, got a bit of get up and go, wasn't a layabout, was quite energised in life. And that's what interested me, because that's what I wanted. I had a shopping list. I airbrushed out all the other stuff. You know, I airbrushed out the fact that she didn't really get grace. I airbrushed out the fact that she fell out of the emotional crazy tree. I airbrushed out the fact she had massively big highs and lows. Had a tendency to be too clingy. I airbrushed all that out because I had my shopping list. But of course she had a shopping list too as well, didn't she? She came into a relationship with a shopping list. Her shopping list was man, any man almost, man will do. Christian man, even better, and Christian man with a little bit of focus. And she airbrushed out all the other stuff about all my imperfections, and to her horror, about 2 days into marriage, she learned that I was an arrogant pig. And I was utterly conceited, thought I knew better than everybody else, and was incredibly stubborn with it. So we got thrown together, like so many people. We said we loved each other. And in some sense we were prepared to give a bit, but really what we did was, here was this person who met my shopping list, that made me feel good, and I translate that to, I really love them. Because we do that with things, don't we? That's why my daughter says, I love sweets. It's not that she has a particular kind and protective, secure, giving attitude towards the sweets. She just loves her sweet because when she eats it, it makes her feel good. And so often that is where we start with our relational trend. It's not quite what one flesh had in mind, is it? I will be unified with you and stick with you and nurture you and encourage you and see you built up. So we got together, like so many, not because we loved them, but because we loved me. And they do the stuff that makes me happy. Thankfully, the Lord had a greater plan. And as the car crash emerged, there was only one thing that kept us together, and that was the faithfulness of God and a commitment to the fact that He has said, you do not split up. So we never considered divorce. Murder, yes, repeatedly, but not divorce. And through that process, the Lord was so gracious to us. What the normal pattern is, I stay in this as long as they make me feel happy. But the moment they don't make me feel happy, I leave. If they don't deliver my happiness, I'm not interested. Now that puts massive strain on relationships. For those of you who aren't married, you know this. If you're in some sort of relationship, always in the back of your mind is this person going to walk out and leave me? Because they haven't committed to me for life. It leads to terrible relational confusion. So we don't want to look at things the individualistic way. This pattern that Jesus has is, I know he says, I know you're hard-hearted. I know you want to take these things and use them for your own. But remember, anybody who comes after me must deny themselves, i.e. deny that hard-hearted element of themselves, take up their cross, be willing to suffer for the cause of my kingdom, for the good of other people, and follow me. Do this with your one flesh perspective, and I will do good and great things within you. So what are we to do now? What we're supposed to do is we're supposed to pray, Lord, I need you to reorientate my heart and my thinking about the whole way I think about relationships. So if I'm in a marriage, Lord, would you help me to stick at marriage and not look at my marriage partner as the person who is there to fit my shopping list? Lord, give me strength if I need to go to them to say, I'm sorry, forgive me, I'll change. Because if I've been using you in any way, that's not what the Lord intended. He intended to put me with you so that we would complement, support and encourage and flourish together, that we would have strength and use that strength that we've got to serve the community around us, that we would put off our selfish, self-indulgent tendencies. Forgive me that I've not done that with you. Lord, forgive me. Help me to change and be strengthened. Lord, if I've got any of that, I just want to rejoice and say thank you for how you've given me this, despite myself. You really are great and generous. Thank you to you so much. And would you make me a servant in the relationship, in the marriage you've put me in? For those of you who are not currently married at the moment and are thinking about it, it's pretty clear and obvious what we need to be careful of. We need to be careful of going into relationships purely self-gratification. Wasn't that video really helpful about the way and the process we go about it? We're running hard after the Lord, and we see people who are coming alongside and running it well, and some of them will become friends, but some of them we might have unique chemistry with. And what we do is we do not push and try and gain all of the joys and benefits of marriage without any of the promises. That's just being selfish. How dare I try to use you for this thing without having committed to you first? And so when you think about dating, you don't do dating for fun. You certainly don't do hookups, says Jesus. What you do is you treat this person as a dignified brother, sister, neighbour, and you see where it goes from there, and you hold those joys and blessings of marriage until you've got a ring on your finger. I don't often agree with Beyonce. But if you like it, what should you do? Then you better put a... And some of you sitting there and thinking, do you know, I've really messed this one up, or I wish I had this and I don't seem to have this. Then can I tell you that you need to hear what Jesus has to say? Because he wants you to see the whole Bible's message. Because the whole Bible began with a marriage, and what does it end with? A marriage. It began with a marriage between a man and a woman who were made in his image, who were put together in some way to show something of the way that God is by his character and in his kindness. And it ends with a marriage between Jesus, the ultimate bridegroom, and his beloved whom he has committed himself to for all eternity in one flesh, the church, his people. So every single person in here, whether you are married in the human sphere or not, you are involved in the greatest love story, the greatest marriage. Because on that great day, Jesus looks at you and me and he says, will you, Jesus, take that sinner to have and to hold in love and marriage, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health? And Jesus stands there and looks at you and me and says, I do. He says, I know the worst about you and I love you anyway. I know that you are, arrogant, self-absorbed, conceited, fell out the emotional crazy tree, have got sins that are as scarlet and are up to your eyeballs in confusion and mess, but I love you. I love you, church. And your future is one wedded to me eternally, and I will never ever fail you. So marriage is important because of what it points to. It points to the gospel reality of Jesus loving every single person in abundance here. Again and again and again, he loves us. He is faithful to us. So the place where Jesus would have us finish is, you have got the better thing, whoever you are, whatever your circumstance, whatever your situation, if you put your faith in Jesus. Whatever, if you're in a good marriage or a hard marriage, you're ultimately part of the bigger marriage. If you're in no marriage and don't want marriage, you're in the bigger marriage. If you can't have marriage, you're in the bigger marriage. Jesus loves you and will never leave you nor forsake you. That will soften your heart, that will comfort your pain, and that will give you a direction that nothing else in this life can. And with that in mind, let's pray. Heavenly Father, as we've been challenged to today, please would you give us a soft heart and a willingness and a readiness to pursue hard after you as the one who has loved our soul and bound himself to us in love and mercy. We praise you for that, Lord. And we want to confess in our heart that we do have a tendency towards confusion and hard-heartedness and taking these good things and trying to run it our way. Lord, forgive us for the times when we've dishonoured you in doing that. Forgive us the times when we have hurt other people in the doing of that. Forgive us, Lord, the times when we rush to other kinds of comfort when we've been hurt, rather than find our comfort in your love and faithfulness. You know each person in this room, Lord. You know how each of us need to find renewal in Jesus. Please would you show us each what that looks like. And as we go away and reflect and pray on this and maybe work it through with friends or talk about it with people who are wise, you would help us to know how to live lives that are patterned after you, the one who gave himself away so that others could have a future. Help us to know how to do that, full of faith and dependency upon your grace. For we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. I think we're going to sing again before we turn to the table.